Hello and welcome to a Team Moray Robotics event recap. On November 23rd, I competed at RABID's Turkey Brawl event with my Antweight combat robot, Moray. RABID is an event near Richmond, Virginia, and it hosts plastic ants and full combat ants. This is the second event that I've competed at, and I went to RABID Summer Showdown a few months earlier, where I also brought Moray. At that event, Moray lost its 2 tournament fights and then lost a grudge match, so going into Turkey Brawl, Moray was winless. If you want to see the improvements that I made to Moray, I have a whole video about that, but basically, I was a lot more confident in my chances of winning a fight. Moray is a 1-pound full combat Antweight with a titanium 2-toothed vertical spinning disc and various front-end attachments. To very quickly recap the changes I made, Moray now uses a carbon fiber upright and top plate to reduce weight while maintaining durability. I also shortened the chassis to make weight for an 11.1 volt battery, the big disc, and front attachments. And then I switched to the Repeat Robotics brushed motors for better durability. Before I go over my fights, I'll say that this was another great event hosted by RABID, and it ran very smoothly and was a great experience for the builders. RABID has a double elimination tournament, so I had to lose twice to be out of the competition. My first winner's bracket fight was against Max, a modified Viper kit. Max took the stock vertical spinner Viper kit and added on an all-metal wedge and top plate, metal back armor, and a large Lexan panel that's probably mostly cosmetic. I was actually very happy with this matchup because I started combat robotics by getting a Viper kit vertical spinner and messing with it at home. So I knew that the spinner was not particularly damaging, and I was also confident that Moray's long PLA forks could get underneath Max's wedge. The fight starts, and I try to go straight at Max to get under the wedge, but Moray has some trouble doing that, and the first few exchanges see Moray riding up Max's wedge. At one point, Moray gets flipped over, and you can see that it can self-right now by hitting the floor with its spinner. Moray finally delivers the first hit of the fight after getting underneath Max's wedge. This hit takes a sizable chunk out of the wedge and throws Max into the air. Moray gets an opening and hits Max from behind, again throwing it into the air, but this time Max lands upside down. Rewatching the fight, I realized that I could have left Max to be counted out because the Lexan piece prevented it from driving inverted, but I chose to keep attacking and I shattered the Lexan. Then Moray chips away at the wedge some more, but Max's spinner comes down on Moray's left fork, ripping it off, before its spinner knocks it back upright. Moray wins an exchange, and then shows off the gyroscopic force of the spinner, which keeps it upright after a push from Max. Max wins some exchanges, and you can see Moray push against the wall to self-right. Max gets its best hit, ripping the other fork off of Moray and flipping it over. Now I knew that I would have to get around to the side of Max, because without the forks, Max could get underneath Moray if we went head-on. The robots exchange a few blows, and I get an opening for a few nice hits, including a big one on the backside. Moray rips Max's left wheel, and then I corner Max and tear the entire top plate off, as well as popping the back armor off of one connection point. RABID calls the fight if a battery becomes exposed, so the fight went to Moray, giving me my first ever win. So that fight went very well. Moray did some great damage to the wedge and armor of Max, and of course it exposed the battery by removing the top plate. Moray only took some minor damage to the upright and chassis, with no functional damage done to the robot. The disc took some slight dulling after hitting that metal wedge. The only functional damage I took was the forks breaking. I lost both of the long forks and one of the mounts, but I had a spare pair of them. I gave one of the forks to the driver of Max, and in return, I got this piece of Lexan armor that I broke. Also, since I put Loctite on the bolts for the fork mounts, I tried to unscrew one and it just spun in place. That was a great fight and a great first win for Moray. Since I won, Moray would continue in the winner's bracket, so now Moray, the robot that only had one win, would have to fight the highest ranked full combat ant going into the event, Carlton 379. The new version of Carlton would be debuting at Turkey Brawl, so now it had more configurations. Carlton 379 is a dual vertical spinner that gets a half-pound weight bonus because he uses shufflers instead of wheels. So for this fight, he would be running long forks, so I decided to run Moray's short forks because I knew I couldn't outreach him. I also took the broken fork mounts from the previous fight and bolted them to the side to act as a blade of armor. At the beginning of the fight, I circle Carlton, not wanting to go head on. Carlton pushes into Moray, tipping it onto its side, and Moray's spinner hits Carlton's upright, ripping off his eye. Moray quickly self-rights, and I do a good job avoiding my opponent's attack. Carlton sends Moray flying when it hits the left front corner, and then I get stuck on the floor, allowing Carlton to get a clean hit on Moray's back, which rips into the TPU. Then my favorite part happens when I self-right Moray by using the gyroscopic force of the spinner to do a Ripperoni-style dance, and then bounce off the wall. Carlton lands a small hit to the underside of Moray. Carlton hits Moray's right wheel and then kind of juggles it in the air a little bit, but then Carlton lands a hit that flips himself over, and this would be a great opportunity for me, but the hit against the wall disabled Moray's right motor. Carlton self-rights and destroys my weapon motor before propping Moray up against the wall. He keeps the fight going, and then ends it by ripping the left wheel straight off of Moray. So Moray lost pretty bad, but I'm happy with how long it lasted, and I'm proud of how well I drove at the beginning. In terms of damage, the top plate had some damage done to it, but it was perfectly reusable and took no functional damage. The wheels were totally fine, but I think I lost at least one part of a hub. The upright got hit and damaged, but still works just fine. The spinner only got small chips taken out of it. The back took damage, but the hit did not breach the chassis. The small forks broke, and the front left of the chassis was torn into, but again, the hit didn't breach the chassis at all. The weapon motor took a direct hit and broke, then the left side wheel was ripped off when the entire motor shaft snapped off, which is extremely impressive. Also, the broken fork mounts worked great because Carlton hit one and broke it off, but the chassis wasn't even touched in that hit, so I'm happy with that. And I was given Carlton 379's eye that I took off, so in exchange I gave them the broken motor. Carlton's eye actually fits Moray perfectly. So overall that wasn't that bad because I lasted a while and drove pretty well against a really fantastic opponent. Moray was now on the loser's bracket, meaning if I lost, I was done for the day. My opponent would be BPRC Twiddle, a robot that's usually an overhead saw, which might be my favorite weapon type in combat robotics. This fight had some interesting lead up to it, because in Twiddle's previous battle it got torn to pieces by Heat Miser, and just barely won by a lucky knockout. Because of the amount of damage from the previous fight, Twiddle was not in great condition for this fight, and it ran a lifter instead of its typical saw. The builder Zane even congratulated me for winning before the fight and told me that Twiddle was held together with hot glue and hope. I chose to run Moray's long forks again to try and outreach the control robot. When the fight starts, Twiddle goes for a box rush but misses, and I was shocked at just how fast that robot was. Moray gets the better of the first few exchanges, knocking off a googly eye, and then Twiddle gets a great lift and push across the box. Or maybe just a push. Moray does a gyro flip and self-rights, and then I manage to flip Twiddle after some struggling to get a good hit. And then I land a few good shots. At this point, it seemed pretty clear that Twiddle was stuck, but the wheels were still spinning, so I wanted to knock him back upright so the fight could keep going. I also wanted to hit the googly eye, which I did. After a while of getting mild hits trying to flip him back upright, Zane taps out, giving Moray its second win by knockout. So that fight was a little disappointing. It's a shame Twiddle didn't work right, and Moray struggled to really get much engagement with its spinner. Fortunately though, Moray didn't take any damage, and only needed to have its battery charged and configuration swapped for the next fight. My next fight would be a rematch between either Hellish Rebuke or Goal Line, who both beat Moray at my first event. I was hoping to fight Hellish Rebuke because I did alright against him last time, and with the new and improved Moray, I had a decent chance of winning. And I didn't want to fight Goal Line because that thing's just terrifying and not even the arena's safe. Of course, I ended up fighting Goal Line. Since the last event, I made weight for 2 PLA wedges and the big disc, which is a big improvement from last time when I fought Goal Line. I knew the wedges would be too weak to deflect Goal Line's hits, and that they would probably break on the first impact, but they should protect my chassis at least for a little bit, so my battery wouldn't get destroyed like the last time we fought. I was hoping that I could absorb Goal Line's hit with the wedges, even if they broke, and then hit him with my spinner and throw him off balance. I planned on going for a box rush, but when the fight starts, I see that he's already up to speed, so I decide to drive a little bit more strategically. Of course, on the first hit, goal line splits the left wedge in half, but the hit does get goal line off balance. I see that he's vulnerable and come in for an exceptionally well-placed attack. Just before I can land a hit, goal line bounces back onto its wheels and splits Moray's other wedge. I end up oversteering and Moray's right tire gets torn off by goal line and Moray gets flipped. While trying to self-right, Moray does this crazy gyro flip and I don't entirely know how that works. Then goal line pulls a Moray and hits the wall instead of its opponent. This knocks him across the arena, where he gets high-centered on half of Moray's wedge. He's stuck on the wedge for a bit, and this would have been a great time to attack, but I was struggling to self-right, and he eventually frees himself from the debris. Moray is able to self-right, though, and I still had a chance here, because the weapon was still working, and I could fully pivot to face goal line, even on one wheel. Moray takes a small chassis hit as I try to circle goal line and hit the back. We go weapon to weapon and Moray manages to not be completely destroyed. Then in a hit very similar to our first fight, goal line hits the functional side of drive on Moray and we both fly to opposite corners. This hit incapacitates Moray and goal line takes Moray out of the tournament. Even though I lost pretty easily, I'm still happy with how that went because I was able to take more hits than the last time we fought, and even though the drive system died, both motors were actually still functional, unlike my first event. On the right side, the wheel came off, and the motor was perfectly fine. And then on the left side, the screws that face mount the motor on got pushed into the chassis, meaning the motor was no longer attached to the chassis, but it still worked. Besides that, the chassis took some hits, but all the damage is mostly cosmetic because, again, none of the hits broke all the way through the TPU. Both wedges were destroyed, but they did their job protecting the chassis. You can see why they broke so easily, and I use this light PLA because they're free to have printed and they're very lightweight. But I'll need to figure out something better for the next event for when I fight horizontal spinners. Also, I gave Nick a piece of one of the wedges he destroyed. Well, Moray was out of the competition with a 2-2 record, but that's a lot better than the first event. Moray also fought in the full combat rumble at the very end of the day, which is a completely for fun sort of fight, and it didn't have any sort of time limit either. When the rumble starts, I immediately go after Blu-ray and get around to the back, but before I can get a hit, the Melty Brain hits us, and Moray ends up landing spinner first on top of Red Whirligig, and takes a hit from it. I end up between Carlton 379 and Overdraft, which might be the worst scenario I could possibly think of. Then Carlton starts shredding the right wheel while Overdraft lands some shots to the top plate. I do win an exchange with Overdraft though. You can see that the left side drive went down after this, and I don't know exactly how this happened. I land some hits on one of the Banana Buddies and then throw it on top of Red Whirligig. After being forced into ripping the Melty Brain apart, Moray gets a great hit on Hellish Rebuke. I tried not to cause a lipo fire by hitting the pile of wires that used to be a Melty Brain, so I very carefully gyro turn around in the corner before Red Whirligig takes out the other side of drive. For the rest of the rumble, Moray becomes an arena hazard and occasionally makes contact with another robot. Red Whirligig was voted on as the winner of the rumble, which is very interesting because it's a plastic Antweight, yet it won the full combat Antweight rumble. In terms of damage from the rumble, both of the little forks broke off. I know this one was broken by Red Whirligig. I'm not sure exactly what happened to this one. Then both sides of drive went down. So on this side, the screws that face mount the motor pushed in again, and it looks like both of the ESC wires pulled away from the motor. And then on this side, this is crazy because I'm pretty sure Red Whirligig did that, and the fact that it's a plastic ant bending metal like that is just wild to me. Carlton 379 tore up the wheel pretty good, and then Overdraft actually got some hits in here that you can see, but shockingly it didn't end up breaking through the carbon fiber at all, so I'm really happy with that. And yeah, other than that, it looks like Moray is pretty much okay. Overall, I'm very happy with how this event went for Moray. I got my first wins, and my only losses were to the eventual champion and runner-up, so that's pretty good. The chassis thickness seemed to be perfect, so I'll keep that going forward, and the weapon and carbon fiber parts worked great. I will need to change the wedge setup for when I fight horizontal spinners because the current PLA wedges just don't work well. The drive motors worked great this time. It's just that the mounting setup is something that I need to change. In the Carlton and goal line fights, as well as the Rumble, I had issues where the screws that mount the drive motors pushed through the TPU of the chassis, which was something that I was a bit worried about before the event, because I had some trouble mounting the motors when I was setting up this new version of Moray. I already know what I'm going to do to fix this issue, so that should be fixed for the next event. I'm also going to try to make weight for wheel guards, mainly to protect the hubs so the motor shafts don't end up bending. I also might print my own hubs to reduce weight and keep them from getting bent in every fight. Alright, so that's it. I'm very happy with Moray's performance, and the next time I compete should be at Motorama with a new version of Moray and possibly another robot.